Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're positively into Christmas week. I do not have my purple ho-ho hat out, but I am giving away really cool stuff. The Maryland Lottery giving us these peppermint payout multipliers. Had a couple of winners the other day over at Far and Daughter, as well as our O-Snap gingerbread sniffers, as well as the unscented, but still very lucky. Unwrap the cash Maryland Lottery tickets. We're going to be at Wise Markets on Monday this week with former professional wrestler Derek Frazier, former Maryland Stadium Authority Chairman Tom Kelso, talking stadium deal. We have not talked a lot of baseball here in the offseason, certainly not where the Ravens are, but we're going to do a little bit of that this week. We had a great show at Far and Daughter with I should say former, current rock and roll Hall of Fame drummer Gina Shock, talking some Go-Go's reunion in 2024. So that was kind of fun, as well as Michael Bronfine and Wendy Bronfine from Curio Wellness, giving us some education on the plant, as well as some education on detergents from Hex founder, HEX founder, local company, guy named Drew Westerveld, who played some lacrosse at UMBC. We talked about getting the stink out of my Planet Fitness clothing. Tell you what, the Ravens at 11-3 have us awaiting Christmas in a different way. They're going to be the last game of the week. They're going to play on Monday night. We're going to have all sorts of calories and eggnog and alcohol and food and mistletoe and revelry between now and then. Luke Jones joins us now to pick up the pieces, not just from the injury to Keaton Mitchell and an outstanding effort by Lamar Jackson and another single-digit effort from the defensive side of the football. Luke, the defense here gets lost in all of this when Lamar comes to town, right? Like, I saw Sunday Night Football has that graphic of Lamar coming out of the swamp to go to Everbank Stadium. I'm sure, come Monday night, it'll be San Francisco. But nobody talks about the Ravens defense because Lamar is such a bright light. And on a night when they played at home, Jaguars moved the ball, couldn't score points, made mistakes. Lawrence kicking the ball. I don't know. He just dropped the ball at one point. But defensively, people aren't going to brag on the Ravens. You're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns' #1 defense and whatnot. But beware when this defense comes to town. And that's part of the Brock Purdy thing for Monday night, is to say, this defense might take the ball away once or twice out in Santa Clara. That would be an effective formula for winning on Christmas night.
Yeah, there's no question. And I don't think I wouldn't say no one talks about this defense, but it's certainly overshadowed, right? And I mean, the Browns, statistically, certain statistics, they've been a little bit better. Although I'd also throw out 5 or 6 meaningful statistics. The Ravens have been better than Cleveland's defense. So, but you're right. When you have an MVP caliber quarterback, when you have that franchise guy that is healthy, unlike the Browns with Deshaun Watson, who hasn't played anywhere close to an MVP level since joining them anyway, but you are going to be a little bit overshadowed. And I think what's interesting about Sunday night's game, Nestor, is if you just look at that and you didn't watch the game and you say 23-7, you'd say, oh, that's another dominant performance by the defense. It wasn't as dominant as we've seen at other times this year. I mean, they gave up 5.5 yards per play. We talked, and you just mentioned it, some of the empty drives that Jacksonville had, especially in the first half. I mean, they missed missed 2 field goals, both beyond 50 yards. So I recognize that. But, I mean, Trevor Lawrence just drops the ball that should have been a 3. I mean, that would have been a much more makeable field goal. And then just an awful mistake by, a #1 overall pick a couple years ago at the quarterback position at the end of the half, where you're inside the 10-yard line and you can't throw it underneath to the flats unless the guy is completely uncovered. I mean, you just can't do that. So, yeah, they left, even if you want to be a little conservative about how you assess it, they left 9 points off the board in the first half. That's a 10-9 game at halftime without them even having to be perfect in that regard. So, the defense did a lot of bending, especially in that first half. And certainly they gave up the big play for the touchdown in the third quarter. But I think what was most impressive to me was the way that they responded after giving up the long touchdown to Agnew. You look at how they came out after that touchdown, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out with the fumble, the strip sack. So that was a really impressive way to respond to giving up a big play that suddenly made it a 1-score game. And you're thinking, oh, okay, is this going to go like it did last year? Is this going to be another one of those times where the Ravens blow a double-digit second-half lead, as they have on several occasions the last couple years. But they finished strongly. I know they gave up some yards at the end of the game, and Terry McAuley was going nuts about what could have been a touchdown in the back of the end zone, in his opinion. But at that point, the Ravens were in control of the game. And even if Jacksonville scores there, you're still feeling really good, especially with the way that they were running the ball in the second half. But this defense did a little more bending, coming off of last week's performance that was just not very good. If we're just calling a spade, especially for the lofty standard that this team has set. But they didn't break. Other than one play, right? So they made plays when they needed to, and certainly Jacksonville helped them out on a few occasions as well. But hey, that's how the league works, right? It's not just winning games, but do things that don't lose you ball games. And the Ravens did things to win. Jacksonville did things to lose, and that resulted in a 23-7 win. And this defense, again, not its most dominant performance of the year, but hey, they gave up one touchdown. At the end of the day, that's what matters. Not yards, not self-inflicted mistakes that the opposition makes that help you out. I mean, it's they made the plays that they needed to make, and they did not break, even though they did a little more bending than we've seen in some other games this year.
Luke, we're talking about offensive injuries, and Keaton Mitchell gone. Mark Andrews gone. Ronnie Stanley's not gone, but he might as well be, right? I mean, he's not going to be a 65 snap left tackle the rest of the way, and certainly not going to play like a lottery pick and play like a $20 million left tackle. Defensively, the Hamilton thing last week, you'd say, well, Roquan Smith, can't lose him. Patrick Queen's playing great. Matabike's playing great. Marlon Humphreys is being paid to play great. But Kyle Hamilton, we talk about all these number one picks they've had that haven't worked out, or guys that are still very much in the Zay Flowers world of, maybe maybe he'll blossom into that. Bateman caught a ball, but hasn't felt like a number one. They drafted a safety after they spent all the money on the safety. You said, why do they need another safety? He's a little bit of an X kind of player. And when he got injured last week, I started to think, well, that won't go well if they have to play against Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, whoever they're going to have to play against. Brock Purdy this week, Trevor Lawrence on Sunday night, certainly Tonga Valoa 2 weeks from now, right? Kyle Hamilton is making a case for becoming their best defensive player, and I'm a Roquan Smith guy, just from where he is, the factor that he is, the kind of body he has and the speed he has and the vision he has. It was said a couple times during the broadcast, you can't teach that. He's as good a draft pick as they've had since Ed Reed in that position, in that sort of lower half of the first round, for where they are for an impact player, and seeing him go out and play well, albeit not at 100%. That's the next thing. No Mitchell now, right? You've lost him. The Marcus Williams thing happened the other night. It's become a little body baggish as we get to the end of the year. I was concerned about Hamilton. He may have played his best game on Sunday night.
Certainly was one of his better games. There's no doubt about that. I think what's interesting, though, and I'm not picking on you here, but I'm just gonna pose a question in general. If you didn't know anything about Kyle Hamilton, what is his position?
I don't know. He plays more like a linebacker. He's up on the line.
That's what he's not really a safety. And I don't say that as a knock on him. Let's be clear. I'm not, because you'll hear some people, he can't play further away from the line of scrimmage and all.
He's not back dropping too deep like Ed Reed looking to pick the ball. I mean, he's looking to destroy the quarterback or blow up a run.
I mean, what makes him so valuable, what makes him so good, is you don't really know what his position is. And I think what makes him so effective for this current Ravens defense, and we'll see how his career evolves. I am not at all implying that he can't play farther away from the line of scrimmage, but he is certainly better playing closer to the line of scrimmage. He's more dynamic. But I think what's so appealing about Kyle Hamilton is that positionless element that he gives you. You can play nickel defense with him as your nickel, Geno Stone and Marcus Williams, and we'll see about Marcus Williams. Of course, he left the game with a groin injury at the end of the first half, so we'll see where he is this week at least. But you can play Hamilton at the nickel, but is it really nickel defense when he plays like a linebacker? And if you consider him a linebacker and the way he plays against the run and can make tackles for a loss, then you kind of get the quality of a base defense while having an extra defensive back on the field. So you've heard me talk about this, and analytics people have talked about this in recent years, talking a lot about the trending towards positionless defense. Wink Martindale talked about this idea that you almost want to have a secondary where it looks like a basketball lineup, where you just have guys, different body types, different skill sets. You can move them around. You have corners that can drop back and play safety. You have safeties that can play the slot. You have safeties that might play out wide on occasion, like a corner. And you can just move guys around because it just helps that pre-snap element of disguise. We've talked about that so much, going all the way back to even Dean Pease, but more so Wink Martindale, and certainly with Mike McDonald now. Those simulated pressures, those amoeba fronts where you have 7, 8, sometimes 9 guys at the line of scrimmage, and a quarterback saying, "Oh my gosh, are they bringing the house?" Or are they dropping guys in the coverage? If they're dropping guys in the coverage, who's dropping? Is it the linebackers? Is it 350-pound Michael Pierce? So you have all those elements, but Kyle Hamilton's the guy that it feels like he makes that go more than anyone. And you just said, I mean, Roquan Smith is the heart and soul, has become the heart and soul of this defense in a little over a year's time. I think that's evident, and that's taking nothing away from Roquan because he's on his way to having another All-Pro, Pro Bowl kind of season. But I think Kyle Hamilton, what he gives them as a player in coverage, playing the run, ability to blitz, whether he's playing linebacker or safety, or he's a slot corner. I mean, really, if we're being technical about it, he's much more slot corner than safety in terms of where he lines up. So it really just gives you such a fantastic, versatile element to this defense that, again, you look at it in real simplistic terms, you say, okay, well, they have 5 defensive backs on the field, so they're in the nickel package. But when he plays like a linebacker, then you're looking at it more in terms of that's more like a base, 3-4, 4-3 over, however you're aligned. And we know the Ravens are multiple anyway, but it's just such a dynamic player that makes you so multiple. I mean, this is a guy who can cover anyone. Big tight end. I mean, we'll be talking about this a lot. George Kittle this week, Travis Kelce come the postseason. I mean, and name the tight end. Kyle Hamilton's 6'4". I mean, normally when you're talking safeties, linebackers, corners, however you want to try to approach a Kelce or a George Kittle or anyone that's fit that profile of being basically a big-bodied wide receiver at tight end. I mean, Travis Kelce doesn't line up as an inline tight end very often. He's lining up in the slot. Kittle's a little bit different in that regard. But the point is, the reason why those guys are such matchup nightmares are, linebackers are too slow, corners are way too small, and most safeties are too small to cover those guys. Kyle Hamilton can run. He's big. He's physical. You've seen him cover wide receivers effectively. I mean, he can do it all. So he is just this. I mean, to call him a chess piece really doesn't do justice what he can do. Everything that he's capable of doing on the football field. I mean, this is a guy who, could probably line up, all the defensive back positions, of course. Outside linebacker could line up at edge. Could probably, play an off-ball position if you got, in a spot where you lost a couple linebackers.
He could replace Patrick Queen for a couple plays if he had to. Sure.
I mean, and that's the thing. He can line up anywhere. About the only place he wouldn't line up is probably like nose tackle. That'd be kind of the one thing. But I mean, he's just so versatile. So you're absolutely right. I mean, some of the concern when he's leaving the game against the Rams last week in the third quarter, you're thinking, oh, okay, it's one thing to talk about Jacksonville, which had Evan Engram, who, made some plays, but certainly didn't wreck the game or anything like that. I mean, I think
you lose him, it's going to affect the way you can play the game because you don't have anybody that's going to go in and play a multiple 3-4 prong kind of position that that Trevor Lawrence is going to have to look and say, who's the Mike?
Right.
And you heard them yell out 14, a couple of times. Right. Watch 14. You could hear that on the boom mics down there. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore. Luke, we're talking defense. We're talking the San Francisco 49ers. We're talking Christmas. We're also talking crab cakes this week. I have my Fadley shirt on. We're going to be Fadley's next Wednesday to end the year, to end an era at the old Lexington Market as they move into the new market. I'm also plotting big doings for Radio Row Week, so I'll have some details for that as we start the year. Roquan Smith, and him in the middle and the stability he's provided, dude, it feels like he's been here 15 years. He's been here 15 minutes. I mean, he's just ending the first year here, and we sort of take all of this for granted. But this defense, 7 points on the road. I know there was a lot of offense, and they moved the ball, and they made mistakes and missed field goals and all of that. But Roquan Smith in the middle of this and Kyle Hamilton, we're talking about elite of players here on the defensive side that when the bright lights come to town, they want to interview Lamar. They want to talk about offense. They want to talk about all the razzle dazzle. The defense does come in under the radar, and they will against the 49ers as well until the game starts. And then we'll see whether McCaffrey's going to run wild, whether Kittle's going to run wild, what they're going to do with Deebo Samuel. And I mean, weapons are here, but the Ravens have answers, have chess pieces for specifically for the 49ers in a way that the Eagles don't. Other teams, certainly Seattle and the other team, the Rams, the teams they see, don't have those kinds of defensive pieces that the Ravens are going to bring to the table Monday night.
Well, and we'd be remiss. I mean, you mentioned Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton, and rightfully so, but what about Justin Madubuike? I mean, he has more sacks than any Ravens player going back to Suggs and Doomerville back in 2014, almost a decade now. So you have an elite difference maker really at every level of the defense. And again, we talked about Hamilton. It's more of a where he's truly the most dynamic is either at the line of scrimmage or that second level of the defense.
Dude, he might get paid like Aaron Donald at this point when he start, like literally, he might get that kind of money.
Madubuike, I mean, he's not going to get Aaron Donald money, but he's going to get, I mean, whatever fans are thinking right now in terms of how the Ravens are going to operate and proceed with their salary cap. I mean, this team has a lot of free agents, a lot of meaningful free agents. I'm not saying that it's going to be like, it's not going to be like post Super Bowl either time around cap purge kind
What's
of deal.
What's the
list?
Give me top five, just so we get it out for everybody. Madubuike.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot here. So Madubuike, Geno Stone, Jadeveon Clowney, Kevin Zeitler on the offensive side, Odell Beckham on the offensive side. I mean, they've got some Patrick Queen, I mean, so
and guys that they could never pay to come back in the same way because Lamar's money's sitting there now in a different way.
Yeah, I think you're going to be able to pay one of those guys, and I think Madubuike is going to be the guy they try to pay. I mean, he's probably going to get at the way things are trending. He's probably getting the franchise tag. I mean, that's probably how this thing's going to work at this point. And you're going to, I don't know what that.
He's going to be the guy that they're not going to let go.
Off the top of my head, because the Ravens have not had a defensive tackle of that magnitude since Haloti Ngata, who's a different kind of player. But the point is that dynamic, top shelf, elite of the elite kind of guy at what he does. Madubuike is going to make huge money. But the point is, to go back to what you were saying, because you were talking about Roquan Smith and we've talked about Kyle Hamilton. I mean, the difference with this defense now compared to where it was even last year, but more so going back to the Wink years, 2019, where, that defense statistically did not finish overly impressive. It wasn't overly impressive, their final rankings, but keep in mind where their defense ranked from the moment Marcus Peters arrived that year. I mean, they were probably a top 4, top 5 defense, but weren't quite as good against the run. This is not an elite run defense, but it's not a bad run defense by any stretch of the imagination, or it's not really a run defense that concerns me to a dramatic degree. Now, if Christian McCaffrey runs all over them, then that might be a different story. And we're seeing what Buffalo is doing running the ball now. And when Pacheco's healthy for Kansas City, he can run the football. So, I mean, that's the relative weakness of this defense. But I mean, it is just such a great defense. And I think part of, you talked about how it's overshadowed, and yeah, the Lamar element's the massive piece at work there. But again, it's such a collaborative effort. It's such a good to great ensemble cast. I mean, yeah, you have your stars. Roquan's a Pro Bowl player. Hamilton, if he's not a Pro Bowl player, something's wrong. He's absolutely, I think he should be an All-Pro selection or have a good shot to be an All-Pro selection. Problem is, again, he's kind of that positionless, weird, oddball flex kind of guy, as far as defense goes. And then Madubuike, you look at, he's leading defensive tackles and sacks this year. So they have those pieces, but it is just such an impressive collaborative effort. And I've said this over and over. I sound like a broken record at this point, but I mean, so many different guys on this defense have their role. And we've talked about that, whether it was what Arthur Millette did against the Chargers a couple weeks back when, he had a couple splash plays and he played 7 total snaps in that game, and it just, look what Geno Stone's done as, even he's not starting now, although it might be now with Marcus Williams going down on Sunday night, but, just complementary players who have played at such a high level for them, and they have such impressive depth.
Brent Urban's making plays 10 years into this, right?
Sure. I mean, and he's not he's if you ask someone to rank the top 17 guys on their defense, he might be at the bottom of the list. More so probably because you just forget about him. But yeah, I mean, he's especially with Broderick Washington kind of being that guy that if you're going to point out anyone that's had a down season on their defense that isn't related to health, probably be him, especially considering they gave him an extension in August and he was a healthy scratch a few weeks back, if you recall. So, but Brent Urban playing the run, playing 5 technique in the base. They're not in the base very often anymore because of Hamilton. But when they are, he's playing 5 technique for them. So, you just have so many different guys, and Roquan Smith, and I'd say Kyle Hamilton now. They're holding that together. I mean, those are the 2 guys that really make this thing run at an elite level. Defense has been good for a long. I mean, understatement. We're talking about the Ravens here. I mean, their calling card has been good to great defense for over 2 decades now. But for them to be at the level they are now, which is, I've said it over and over, as great a defense as they've had since Ray Lewis and Ed Reed were still playing, it's been because of those 2 guys. But it is so many different guys contributing. And one thing I'll throw out there, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, the pass rush wasn't great on Sunday night. I mean, Madubuike got to Lawrence on the fumble, but let's face it, that first half, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of pressure. I mean, there wasn't a lot of pressure for good portions of the night, but, okay, they were bending a little bit more. Wasn't quite as dominant statistically in terms of yards per play, but they got the stops. They were really good on 3rd down. They were excellent in the red zone. They made plays when they needed to. So, again, another calling card for a defense is, or just like we talked about with the offensive side of the ball, is can you win in different ways? And they've been able to do that when, something might be a little bit off. They gave up a couple big plays on Sunday night, that's for sure. But, they got the job done. And as much as we talk about the stars on this defense, you still talk about the depth. And I mean, top to bottom, it's as deep of a defense as they've had in a really long time. And, we haven't even mentioned someone like Marlon Humphrey, who struggled against the Rams. I thought he was better this past week. He's missed half the season. I mean, you're talking about your highest paid, along with Roquan Smith, one of your 2 highest paid defensive players who's missed half the season. Marcus Williams missed close to half the season.
Well, we talk about this bye, and we talk about not playing Pittsburgh head up if they can win these 2 games. I look at Marlon Humphrey getting rest as being just as important as Morgan Moses or Zeitler or any of sort of the senior citizens. To me, he's more of a senior citizen at this point. And from what you're asking him to do, chase around whoever the number 1 receiver is going to be, and that's going to be, if you see the Bills, you're going to get Diggs. Whoever it's going to be, Kansas City, they're going to have to figure out Kelsey. You're going to have to figure out the wide receivers. Certainly Miami, with the speed they have. Humphrey has to be right in January on the back end in a way that he wasn't in October and September. He hasn't been right most of the year. But I'm starting to feel like they're at a point, unlike Ronnie Stanley, where he's not going to be right. They're not going to get him right. Humphrey, he may be running at full speed by January 20th. He might be.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I mean, it's a calf. That's a tricky injury. I think the reason they were so careful before the bye week was because that's a high setback rate kind of an injury. So that's why they held him out of that Chargers game as a result. And he struggled against the Rams. There's no doubt about it. He even talked about that in the post game on Sunday night. He made mention. He was kind of talking about Lamar and Lamar becoming more of a leader, maturing as a player, maturing as a teammate. He even said that Lamar went up to him, and he said he did it in a good-natured way. But Lamar went up to him this past week and said, "Hey, Marlon, we need better from you." Like, Marlon Humphrey was bad against the Rams. That was rough. I mean, that was really rough, especially at the end of regulation there. So so Humphrey acknowledged it, but yeah, I mean, I think he's the kind of guy that at this point he is a little bit older, but he's not old. He's not, Stanley's been dealing with the same knee and since week one, the ankle for 3 years now, on the other leg. So I mean, Stanley, how healthy is he going to get without months off at this point? Probably not. Probably not going to make that big of a difference. Whereas Marlon Humphrey, as long as he doesn't have a re-injury, then yeah, I'm in agreement with you, and that's something that they're going to need. And look, Brandon Stevens has been a great story on the other side, and he's played. I'd hesitate to say a Pro Bowl level. I don't think he's been that good, but he's been good. I mean, this is a guy who started the year practicing at safety, so it's been a major development for them, especially with Humphrey's health concerns this year. That Brandon Stevens has done that, but yeah, you look at the 49ers, it's not just Deebo Samuel, it's Brandon Ayuk. I mean, George Kittle, we've talked about. I mean, weapons all over the field. Miami, take a look at what the Dolphins did this past week without Tyreek Hill, against the Jets. And I get it. The Jets are a lost cause at this point, but they still have a really good defense. So for them to do what they did, I mean, Tyreek Hill and Waddle, I mean, Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens will need to be ready for that one in 2 weeks, big time. And it's not going to get any easier than that. I mean, we know at this point, the rest of the way, maybe assuming the Ravens get the number one, and I'm making a big assumption there still, they've got to take care of business the next couple weeks. We all understand that, but other than a potentially favorable divisional round matchup, tough games the rest of the way, other than maybe Pittsburgh in week 18, because the Steelers are just a disaster at this point. Not playing like a Mike Tomlin team late in the season. Even some of these years, they haven't been as good. Normally they finish on a higher note. I mean, they're a mess.
Well,
but
I mean,
everyone
that
else
would
is
speak
good.
to the league about the shakeup that's about to happen with Belichick. Wherever Pittsburgh is at this point, whatever they're going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly the Cleveland thing's weird with Flacco. Played well, but not great. Threw interceptions. Did some of the stuff we saw here 10 years ago and making sort of key mistakes, but always has the big arm and can always make the play and isn't afraid. I mean, that's the thing about Joe. He looks
Yeah.
calm and he looks like, hey, if it gets picked, I can hear him. Hey, if it gets picked, it gets picked, but we're going to try to win the game. We're going to come after you and we're going to try to win. And I think, yeah, I don't know if the Browns should scare somebody in January with the defense. If the weather's right, the weather's wrong, the occasion's the right occasion, Cleveland can beat you. And I look at Kansas City, I look at Buffalo coming on in a way where the Ravens are the stalked at this point. The Ravens are the best team. There's no doubt about that. When you talk about 14 straight games where they're winning at the 2-minute warning, talk about a handful of teams in the history of the game have ever done that. So they're head and shoulders above, but there's nothing about any of these teams that I think look second tier at this point. Cleveland looks like they've stepped up and they have a quarterback that can do it, at least in the near short term for a couple of weeks. I don't know that I'd want 18 games at Joe Flacco, but 5 or 6 of them, and enough to win. He didn't play great, but they won. The tournament sets up to be treacherous, and the tournament sets up to make sure that you're not playing week one, especially when you're in this position right now. The biggest upset of upsets would be if the Ravens have to play a game the first week, because that should be job one. Job one is do not get eliminated in the first week of the playoffs because you're the team that's not playing. Let Buffalo, Kansas City, let all of them, Jacksonville, let them, Miami beat each other up and see who comes out of that. That's it's just so paramount right now, because that brass ring of the bye and a week off, and really 2 weeks off if they get through these two to take Pittsburgh off, that's the most important thing they have going on, aside from health and the health of the guys they can get back out on the field.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the playoff field. I mean, you mentioned Joe Flacco. I thought Flacco was pretty bad until the amazing throw to Amari Cooper. I mean, where Cooper's coming across the field and Flacco just fits it into the window.
Nobody in the league throws that ball. I mean,
Josh Allen probably throws that ball.
Okay.
Because Josh Allen, and put aside, I don't want to hear anything about the off-field. He's the modern day Brett Favre. I mean, Josh Allen he doesn't care. He's going to turn the ball over a little more than other quarterbacks out there. But my gosh, I mean, that guy is He's fearless out there in terms of throwing or running. I mean, you always use the Lamar running into linebackers. Josh Allen literally does that.
So
Lamar
does
has
Will
always,
Levis, by the way. He
well,
plays that style. He got his head creamed.
but
Yeah.
Josh Allen's done it. He's played at MVP caliber level for a few years now. But the point, going back to Flacco, I mean, he made that big throw and made plays at the end of the game, and Cooper helped him out. And Njoku got open, and certainly we know Joe loves throwing the tight ends. But yeah, I mean, you look at this playoff field right now. I mean, while we're doing it, I'm looking at the standings.
Well,
Miami,
Joe
we've talked about.
Flacco's capable. I'm not sure Gardner Minshew is. Just as a side at this point in his career.
Although I'll say this, I mean, Indianapolis, they're going to get Jonathan Taylor back. Go look at where the Colts rank in terms of sacks. I mean, we've talked a lot about the offensive line with the Ravens, and as I bring this up, I mean, go look at the top 8 in sacks in the NFL. And sacks are not everything in terms of evaluating a pass rush, but obviously it's a major part of it. But right now in the top 8, obviously the Ravens leading the way. Miami, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Buffalo, Cleveland. I mean, there you go. That might be most of your playoff field right there. Buffalo has to get the job done. Indianapolis has work to do, certainly. But you look at it, we've talked about Miami. Kansas City's a given. I mean, they're still traditionally speaking, they're still the team to beat because they're the defending Super Bowl champions. Jacksonville, they're a pretender. They might make it. They're a pretender at this point. They've proven what they are the last 3 weeks against the AFC North. 2 of those at home, and they lost all 3. I mean, if Indianapolis or Houston doesn't overtake them, fine, but no one's worried about Jacksonville at this point until they prove otherwise. But Cleveland, with their defense, with a Joe Flacco who, to your point, I agree with you. I wouldn't want him to be my quarterback for 17 games in 2023, but he's got more pedigree. He has experience, and they don't need him to play great. They need him to play okay, and they have a chance to win with their defense. So we haven't even mentioned. I'm not worried about the Bengals being in the AFC Championship game, but got to give Cincinnati some credit for the way that they've continued to play. I mean, we talked about this a lot with the Ravens last year and the year before that, even with losing heartbreaking games, how they kept competing without Lamar Jackson. The Bengals, I thought they would roll over without Joe Burrow. I mean, I really did. And look at what they've done. I mean, right now they're in position to be a wild card. And Jake Browning isn't great. He's not Joe Burrow, but he's played okay football for them. And, they still have the wide receivers that they have, and they've unlocked a little more out of their backfield production. So, you don't dismiss them. It's a division rival, right? I mean, we always talk about that. Indianapolis, Houston. I mean, Houston, the big key for me is CJ Stroud, his health of some of their other players. And by the way, I know you'll agree with me on this. Tennessee got exactly what they deserved wearing the Oilers throwbacks against Houston. Great to see the Texans beat them.
I mean, that's a dick move of all dick moves.
Totally.
And I'm an Oiler fan, and I have a closet full of stuff, and I love the stuff. I mean, of all the things I stalk on eBay to buy stuff, I buy these crazy belt buckles, but I look at Oilers stuff because I have sort of a throwback affinity. I have all of that stuff. They're a dormant franchise. If you bring them back to life, I'm not a Tennessee Titans fan. What blew me away was looking in the stands at how much of that stuff they're selling. I mean, I know it's good looking, and I know but I'm thinking if I'm in Nashville, why do I want that? It'd be like me wanting a Jim Brown jersey here or something. I'm much more likely to wear a Burt Jones jersey here than I am anything else. And we're from that broken town. I am not you as much as me, although you had to wait for the team to get here when you were 12 years old. But, I had the team taken away twice now, as I saw Chad Steele getting himself onto television. He's great at that, by the way. He's so handsome. But the notion that the Oilers would do this and to think it's okay and to wear it, but the fans buying into it's the weird thing to me. The Tennessee I look through that stadium and I'm like, everybody in the stadium looks like Warren Moon or Earl Campbell. And they've got Oiler bunting everywhere. And I'm like, dude, Vrabel, before the game, and I saw this in the post game, Vrabel had a Bum Phillips hat on. That he took a picture with Baldinger at like 11:30. They're out on the field. Baldinger put that up, and I'm like, oh, Vrabel, I know their division. You want to not like them. I want to not like Pittsburgh. But I'm not going to piss on Art Rooney or make fun of Terry Bradshaw
Yeah.
or Franco Harris. I mean, like and John McClain would say this, and I had Dan Pastorini on, and I'm friends with Dan. Dan loves that they're wearing it, right? Hey, all the old Oilers love that it's alive, and the way that Bruce Laird and all the Baltimore people, Tom Maddie, those people here pined away from it. But and by the way, the Indianapolis Colts were 1956
I,
throwbacks, and all
I
I
was going
could
to say
think
that.
was, if you want to wear the 56 throwbacks, great. Play the game in Baltimore. You want to do that? I mean,
I
it's
I
tacky.
find I find these look, and you'll hear people, and I had someone say this to me on Twitter. They'll explain it. They'll say, "Well, the Oilers were the Tennessee Oilers for a
Yeah,
couple years,
yeah.
and they're the team. They've held on to the name, the colors. They have the rights to wear it. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should." And that's what either of those fall into that category. Same thing. Indianapolis. The Colts have been in Indy longer than they were in Baltimore at this point in time. I mean, that's where we are. Like we're at that point,
40
right? It's been 30
years.
years.
40
Yeah, 40
years.
years. Sorry, 40 years. They've been longer. I mean, we passed that. We've gone long past that at this point. So it's odd to me, but anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Houston Texans, they did to the Titans exactly what the Titans
And they're
deserve. They
going to do it
deserve to
every
lose that
year, by
game.
the way. Now, if they've sold the
And
jerseys, they're going to wear it.
well, and I was just going to say, your point about the fans in the stands, it's a great looking uniform. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's like
Well, it's
it's like the Ravens with the black jerseys. The black jerseys, especially younger fans, they're sexy. They like them more. They like those more than the purple. It's a little more of a novelty. Yeah,
Tom
you're
Brady
going to have
won
people
a
buy that.
dozen championships in that blue, you know, Tron outfit they wear. Patriot Pat still looks
Oh,
better.
it's still better. No doubt.
And I think about the Chargers have all but abandoned Stan Humphries and the sort of purple and gold stripes that they had, the violet looking thing that they had for years. When the classic colors, that's part of the majesty of the game and the tradition of the game and all of that, but tacky, man. Really, really tacky. And shame on Amy. It makes me embarrassed to have been an Oiler fan, even though this stuff's good looking. But it feels dirty to me. You know what I mean? Like sort of the Angelos Orioles
It,
version of it just sort of feels like I want to move on, or like the Washington Commanders,
it's
how that's going to get moved on from, because it's an era it looks nice. It's all cool. Let Earl Campbell have it. You don't need to wear that against the Houston NFL franchise.
and
It's gross.
it's bad enough to do it anyway, but and I don't even want to give them credit because they're Indianapolis and you mentioned, yeah, I was a baby when they moved, but I heard it from my parents. I heard it from my grandparents. That's in my blood as far as a Baltimorean, as it pertains to sports and professional football here. But I just to do that directly against the city whose team you took and to flaunt that, it's in poor taste. But something I wanted to mention as we went off on our uniform tangent here, because I was going through all the AFC, the playoff field and the contenders. I still look at the team at the bottom of that, which I'm not counting Pittsburgh at this point. They're 7-7. Not counting Denver at this point. They're 7-7. But currently ninth place in the AFC, Buffalo. I think of all those teams, whether you're talking, if you're the Ravens, if you're Miami, if you're Kansas City, any team that looks like, I think right now those are the three. I mean, they're the top three teams in terms of seeding, top three teams in terms of record. I mean, no one wants to play Buffalo in January because you see what that team is capable of. Now, they have to get there. And I will say this, as much as we were talking about Buffalo's record being challenging a month ago, the fact that they went to Kansas City and won, the fact that they beat up on the Cowboys at home, you look at their last couple games now, at Los Angeles, the Chargers, who just fired their coach and just completely quit in that Thursday night abomination, home against New England, against the Patriots, who, as to your point, look like they're moving on from Bill Belichick and they're awful, and then home or at Miami, week 18, which, depending on how the next couple weeks play out, that could be for the division title. I mean, that's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination for Buffalo to win out. And if they win out, they'll obviously be in the playoffs. So, I mean, that's that's the team right now to me that's, and you mentioned the Browns, and I'll hear that to a degree because they do have a really good defense. They do have Joe Flacco, and I'll hear it on the Browns winning a game, maybe two if they get a favorable draw and the bounces go their way.
Well, you'd much
But
rather see
Buffalo from a
Houston or
talent,
Indianapolis or Jacksonville. You'd rather see any of those teams come in here than Buffalo.
other than Kansas City, just because they're the Chiefs, Buffalo is the team I'd least like to play in January because of what they're looking like right now. I think for as much as they got some criticism making the change at offensive coordinator, look at what their offense has become since they made that change. The running backs are more involved. Cook had a massive game, 179 yards rushing against a Cowboys team that kind of is what we thought they were. They're great at home and they stink on the road. I mean, that's what the Cowboys are. So, if they're not going to get home field, then it's probably going to be an early exit for them because that's just how the Cowboys, it's kind of what they've been for 25 years now, even when they've been pretty good. But I just look at that Buffalo team and you can't ignore how up and down they've been. So the idea that, okay, they might need to win out here to make it. And then, okay, are they going to win 3 or 4 games in a row in January and early February? If you're a Bills fan trying to talk yourself into this right now, that's a lot of consistency that they haven't necessarily shown, but they've had the peaks or they've had the valleys. They've had their times where they have looked bad and they've had some really bad losses, starting with the Jets on opening night when Aaron Rodgers went down 3 plays into the season. But when they're playing their best football, boy, they are really, really impressive. So if I'm the Ravens, if I'm the Chiefs, if I'm Miami, I am hoping not to be seeing Buffalo as a wild card. And certainly if you're Miami, you're hoping that Buffalo stubs their toe, as they've been apt to do at times this year. So they're not playing an AFC East championship game week 18. But boy, they are the team to me more than any other wild card right now where look out because from a true talent level standpoint, I've said it for a couple of weeks now. I think the Bills are a top 5 team in the NFL in terms of ability. Now they have to go out and do it, and they still have a long road for them just to get back to that point.
All right, break out the rice-a-roni. It's a San Francisco week here. Break out the eggnog and all the holiday cheer. Christmas night, Ravens taking on the 49ers as the best team in the AFC, takes on the best team in the NFC. Luke is going to be out in Owings Mills all week long, covering all things Ravens and practice and Owings Mills. We're going to be at Wise Markets on Monday, giving away the Unwrap the Cash top prize $5,000 from the Maryland Lottery. Also have some O snaps as well as some peppermint payouts. Our friends at Window Nation, 866-90 Nation, reminding you, hey man, Windows, buy 2, you get 2 free, 0% financing for 5 years. It's cold out, keeps it warm in, saves some money. It certainly has saved me money the last year and a half, and I'm looking forward to some doors. I'm wearing my Fadley shirt. We're going to be at Fadley's on Wednesday morning after Christmas, wrapping up our stint in the old Lexington Market. We're moving into the new Lexington Market. We're going to be doing some crazy, crazy good stuff for Radio Row and Super Bowl week, so we're excited about that as well. Also want to give a shout out to our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. My little orange light came on. Jiffy Lube taking great care of us, oiling us up, and so much more. You can always learn more at jiffylube.com and Jiffy Lube Multi-Care. Luke is in Owings Mills. I am here. You hopefully are done your holiday shopping and get your traffic together this weekend. Get the family together. Love them all up. I hope everybody has a great, great holiday here this week. We'll get back after it. We're going to talk some baseball. Going to talk some stadium with the Maryland Stadium Authority stuff going on. Tom Kelso is going to join us at Wise Markets for our Maryland Crab Cake Tour, as well as Derek Frazier. We're going to get a little professional wrestling in, talking about the local circuit as well. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking in the first place. Baltimore Ravens and Baltimore Positive. Happy holidays.